Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're going to unpack one of the most infamous, maybe misunderstood, and definitely heavily debated texts in human history, Niccolò Machiavelli's The Prince. For centuries, the word Machiavellian has basically been synonymous with dark mythology, manipulation, and pure evil. But when you actually read the text, a totally different picture emerges. What we're looking at isn't some comic book villain's manifesto, but a highly categorized, relentlessly logical instructional manual for political and physical survival in the chaotic world of 16th century Italy. Literally, it's a masterclass in pragmatic mechanics. Okay, let's dive into this, because Machiavelli's brutal, practical logic is perfectly captured right from the start. He isn't telling rulers to be cruel just for the fun of it. He's treating human psychology like a measurable variable. He argues that if you absolutely must inflict harm to secure your position, do it swiftly and comprehensively, so the resentment doesn't drag on, but dispense your favors slowly, little by little, so the goodwill lasts. It's pure, unsentimental strategy, and it sets the exact tone for the pragmatic mechanics we're going to uncover today. Part 1. The man behind the myth. Now, before we can really grasp these cold calculations, we have to look at the guy's desperate reality. Machiavelli actually grew up witnessing the golden age of the Medici family. But his real career, 14 years as a high-ranking official and diplomat, happened while the Medici were exiled and Florence was a free republic. He traveled across Europe, meeting kings, popes, and observing power right up close. But then, in 1512, the Medici forcibly returned to power. The republic collapsed, Machiavelli was immediately fired, suspected of conspiracy, thrown in prison, and even tortured. He was eventually released, but he was banished to a small, rural property out in the country. And honestly, this context completely humanizes our source material. Because The Prince isn't the work of an untouchable emperor, it's the work of a jobless, exiled man sitting in a study at night, desperately trying to prove his undeniable expertise to the exact same people who took everything from him. He's essentially saying, look, I've spent 15 years studying how great men win and lose. Here is literally everything I know. Use me. Let's move on and see how this builds in part 2, the varieties of power. Now, what's really interesting about this comparison is how Machiavelli systematically breaks down how different states are structurally acquired and held. He brilliantly compares centralized versus decentralized power by contrasting the Ottoman Empire, which he calls the Turk, with the King of France. The Turk rules through servants who owe absolutely everything to him. Because of that, you can't easily bribe them to rebel, which makes the territory incredibly hard to conquer. But if you do manage to defeat the ruler, you just replace him, the structure holds, and it's super easy to keep. France is the complete opposite. The king is surrounded by ancient lords who have their own loyal subjects. You can always find some disgruntled French baron to help you invade, making it easy to invade. But once you win, you are surrounded by powerful lords who will inevitably turn on you. So what does a massive strategic failure actually look like? Well, Machiavelli gives us an instructional list of don'ts, looking specifically at King Louis XII of France when he invaded Italy. The king alienated the weak states that initially welcomed him. Even worse, he helped strengthen an already massive power, the Church, and he invited a powerful foreign rival, Spain, right into the region. Finally, he failed to either live in the conquered territory to oversee it himself or to send colonies to secure it. And Machiavelli treats these not as moral failings, but as technical blunders that mathematically guaranteed Louis would lose his Italian territories.
Part 3. Fortune, Ability, and Wickedness.
Now we arrive at probably the most controversial part of the text, the mechanics of extreme violence. Machiavelli evaluates rulers who rose to power through sheer wickedness, like Agathocles the Sicilian, who literally slaughtered his own city's senators to become king. But Machiavelli impartially analyzes this as calculated math. He defines proper cruelty as violence applied all at one blow, exclusively for immediate security and then immediately replaced by actions that benefit the subjects. Improper cruelty, on the other hand, is violence that starts small but multiplies over time, keeping the state in a constant state of terror. A ruler using proper cruelty can eventually stabilize. A ruler using improper cruelty is doomed. And this brilliantly illustrates how he views human memory and resentment as completely manageable variables in statecraft. If you have to do something terrible to secure your state, get it over with immediately. The populace will eventually normalize the shock, but if you drag the violence out, the fear and hatred will just compound until you're overthrown. Conversely, drip feed your benefits, so you're constantly celebrated. Which leads us to Machiavelli's primary example of a ruler doing it absolutely right. Cesare Borgia. Borgia actually acquired his territory entirely through a massive stroke of luck, his father being Pope Alexander VI. Now, usually princes who rise on someone else's luck fall super hard when that luck runs out. But Machiavelli watched Borgia firsthand and was awestruck by his intense ability to lay concrete foundations under his sudden lucky power. Borgia was smart. He knew his political shield, his dad, the Pope, would eventually die, and that would completely strip him of his protection. So he executed a blueprint of ruthless efficiency to prepare. First, he exterminated the bloodlines of the lords he had overthrown, so a future pope couldn't restore them. Second, he bought the loyalty of the Roman nobility to keep the next pope in check. Third, he packed the College of Cardinals with his own allies. And finally, he pushed to acquire maximum power before his father's death. He did everything perfectly. In the end, he was only undone by extreme, almost comical bad luck. He fell deathly ill at the exact moment his father unexpectedly died. But even so, Machiavelli closely studied these actions and holds him up as the absolute perfect model for any new prince to imitate.
Part 4. Ruling the people.
So, moving away from absolute rulers, how does a regular citizen rise to power using the factions within their own city? Well, Machiavelli points out that every city is basically divided into two groups, the nobles who want to oppress and the people who just want to avoid being oppressed. If the nobles raise you to power, you are in big trouble. They see themselves as your equals, and their demands are literally endless. You satisfy one, you anger another. But if you're raised by the people, you stand alone, and their demand is incredibly simple. Just don't crush us. So even in this totally ruthless playbook, Machiavelli emphasizes that a prince can never, ever secure himself against a universally hostile populace. So the crucial point is that relying on fair-weather loyalty is a massive trap. In times of peace, sure, everyone makes promises, but when the state actually needs its citizens, when troubled times hit, a prince will find himself totally abandoned. Dependency is the true foundation of survival. You have to ensure your subjects rely on your authority no matter the circumstances.
Part 5. The problem with mercenaries.
Let me ask you, how exactly should a prince defend his state? If you're a newly minted prince, surrounded by hostile powers, how do you actually enforce all this authority we've been talking about? Do you hire a professional army, or do you arm your own farmers and merchants? Machiavelli argues that getting this specific answer wrong was the fatal flaw of Italian politics at the time. He vigorously contrasts these two models, and he pulls no punches. Mercenaries? Utterly useless. And dangerous. Why? Because their only motivation to die for you is a trifling stipend. That tiny amount of money is not enough to make a man willing to actually lay down his life. If they're bad soldiers, they lose the battle. If they're brilliant soldiers, they're even more dangerous, because they'll eventually turn their ambition on you, their employer. The only secure foundation is a prince's own arms, citizens fighting out of loyalty, fighting for their own homes and their direct survival. The ruin of Italy has been caused by nothing else than by resting all her hopes for many years on mercenaries. That quote shows exactly how Machiavelli diagnoses the vulnerability of his entire country through this single devastating strategic flaw. For decades, Italian city-states outsourced their fighting to hired guns. And when powerful foreign kings marched in, those hired armies just melted away. They fought for a paycheck, not for Italy. And this leaves us with the ultimate question. If the rules of keeping power are purely mechanical, if it's all just pulling levers, balancing cruelty and favor, relying on your own troops, then who is the true architect of a state's fate? Is it fortune, that unpredictable wheel that crushed even a genius like Cesare Borgia? Or is it the prince's calculated, relentless actions? Machiavelli gives us the ultimate playbook to fight fate. But whether we can truly master it, well, that remains the enduring mystery of his work. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the mechanics of power.